Another thrilling episode by Ben A. What do you think happens when you dig too deep into a land that doesn't want to be touched? That was the question Chloe couldn't shake as their jeep rumbled through the narrowing red roads of Umuaka. The forest swallowed them on both sides, thick with trees that leaned in like they were listening. The air changed the moment they crossed the old rusted archway that read "Many have come. Few return." David scoffed, calling it primitive marketing, but Chloe felt something sink into her bones. It wasn't fear, not yet, but a sense that something ancient was watching. She glanced back at Mark, who was fiddling with the GPS that kept blinking in and out. "We're losing signal," he muttered, but David waved it off. "We're here. Coordinates match." In his hand was a faded colonial map, supposedly tracing the path to a diamond vein buried beneath this sacred hill. No locals would guide them. Even the ones who took their money only pointed, then vanished. It didn't matter to David. He had money, permits, drones, and ambition. But Chloe noticed something else, a shrine tucked beneath an Irako tree, small and hand-carved, its bowl filled with clean water that hadn't evaporated in the heat. Mark stepped over it. David didn't even see it. Chloe paused. "Should we?" she began. "Keep moving," David snapped. "We came here to collect, not pray." They pitched their base camp on a clearing where the soil felt wrong, too soft, like it remembered being disturbed. That night, the forest fell completely silent. No crickets. No owls. Just air. Chloe lay awake in her tent, hearing the faint sound of water dripping though it hadn't rained. Mark's tent light flicked on, then off again. In the dark, he whispered, "Do you hear that?" Chloe nodded, eyes wide open. But David snored like the king of the hill, clueless and full of himself. The next morning, they started drilling. And that was when the first crack opened in the earth, small but visible. Mark frowned at the instruments. "The seismic reading's off," he said, confused. "There's something moving underneath us." David dismissed it, again. But Chloe kept thinking about the shrine. About the air. About that question. What happens when you dig too deep into a land that doesn't want to be touched? That night, when she stepped out to pee, she saw footprints near the river. Bare feet. Long wet. And no one in the group had gone down there. As she backed away, she noticed something worse. The bowl at the shrine, empty. Not spilled. Not cracked. Just gone. As if whatever drank from it no longer needed to sip. Umuaka woke before the sun. Children's bare feet slapped the red clay as they ran errands, the market square slowly filled with smoky scent from frying oji, and the rusted town bell rang once to signal the start of a new day. On the surface, the village was alive. But underneath, where silence hides, something was shifting. The birds sang shorter songs. The goats bleated without rhythm. And the old women under the Irako tree who usually told stories now sat in silence, their kola nuts untouched. Obi, the local guide who had taken the foreigners to the Forbidden Hill, stumbled back into the village alone at dawn, his eyes swollen from crying. He said nothing. Just dropped his machete and walked straight into his father's compound, locking the door. Mom Nkechi, the oldest woman in the village, rose slowly from her stool and looked toward the hill. Her lips trembled with words only the spirits understood. "No fires tonight," she warned a passing child. "And no whistling. She listens when the wind is still." No one asked who she was. They knew. That evening, the sky turned a strange bruised color, too red, like a wound refusing to heal. A goat miscarried. A pot of drinking water curdled on its own. When someone mentioned the river's taste had changed, like iron and old stone, the silence that followed was too heavy to sweep away. And still, no one dared speak Otammiri's name. Not yet. But the air had shifted. As if the land itself had taken a deep, terrible breath. Back at the hilltop, Chloe stood still. Her skin prickled in the heat, not from sun, but from something older, an awareness that they were no longer alone. Mark hadn't eaten since yesterday. He barely spoke. He kept listening, tilting his head toward the ground like it was trying to speak. That afternoon, while David plotted their next drill, Mark sat near the stream and whispered to himself. She's close. She's not angry yet, but she's close. Chloe tried to snap him out of it. He looked at her like a stranger. You didn't hear it? He asked, blinking. The voice under the water? Chloe shivered. That night, while the generator hummed and David snored inside his tent, Mark vanished. Chloe had only looked away for a moment, long enough to zip her bag. His tent was open. Empty. No sign of a struggle. Just gone. She ran toward the river with a torch, heart racing. That's when she saw them, Mark's boots, neatly placed side by side on the bank, filled with water to the brim, clear, unmoving, like a shrine offering. No footprints. No splashes. Only stillness. David refused to accept it. He wandered off. We'll find him, he barked. But Chloe's voice cracked as she whispered toward the empty shrine, Please, we didn't mean to offend you. The words fell into the soil. The wind didn't move. And from somewhere beneath them, deep and deliberate, came the soft sound of dripping water, though not a single cloud hung in the sky. By the third morning, Umuaka no longer pretended. The market stall stayed half empty. Smoke from morning fires drifted without scent. 3 goats were found face down in dry soil, their mouths foaming as if they'd drowned, yet there wasn't a drop of water near them. The elders said nothing, but the air said plenty. Children whispered among themselves, daring each other to look into the village stream. They said it had turned still, too still, and if you stared long enough, you'd see your own sin staring back at you. One girl, no more than 7, drew the figure of a tall woman made of water onto the side of her family's hut. When her mother asked who it was, she simply said, She's watching. Obi, once proud and greedy, now lay on a mat, delirious, muttering fragments between sweat-soaked breaths. She walks, she remembers, the hills don't forget. Mom and Ketchy began fasting. She placed herbs at the doorstep and lit black incense only used during ancestral mourning. Her son asked who died. She didn't answer. That afternoon, the village chief, normally loud and ceremonial, walked quietly from compound to compound, instructing that no drums be beaten that week. No dancing. No laughter. Only prayers and silence. Because something had been disturbed. And the land, once patient, was beginning to curl its fingers. On the hill, David found what he had always wanted, shiny confirmation. Glowing stones embedded in the earth, glassy and hard. We found it, he whispered, laughing under his breath. He no longer blinked much. His eyes stayed wide, like he was afraid to miss something. Chloe watched from a distance, her stomach tight. The drills didn't sound normal anymore, they echoed too far, too long. And the soil bled. Not mud, blood, thick and black. David didn't care. He shouted at her to grab the bags, to keep working. Chloe refused. Something was wrong with him. He hadn't slept. Hadn't bathed. And when she found him that night, crouched beside their cooler, he was whispering to it like it had spoken first. His hands were bleeding, deep cuts where he held the diamonds, which now looked wet even in the dry air. They pulsed faintly. Chloe, unable to rest, wandered into the woods and stumbled on a ring of shrines, old, broken, disturbed like theirs. In the center sat a cracked mirror, a bowl of black stones, and a single child's slipper, placed with reverence. Her head spun. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but inside her mind, return what was never yours. She collapsed to her knees. When she returned to camp, the fire had gone out. David stood in the center of the clearing, arms outstretched, facing nothing, yet smiling. She showed me, he whispered. All of it. Chloe stepped back slowly. For the first time, she realized they hadn't just trespassed. They had been invited. By the time the sun rose, Umuaka was already drowning in things it couldn't explain. A fine gray mist hung over the village, but there were no clouds in the sky. The river had crept higher overnight, flooding into yam fields and washing away the market's footpaths. Crops turned yellow at the root, and children who played near the water came home with their tongues purple and their bodies shaking from cold. At first, they blamed the weather. Then, they blamed silence. Mom and Ketchy stood at the heart of it all, barefoot, her wrapper soaked from waist to ankle, as if she had walked out of a storm that never touched the sky. She called for a 3-day mourning. "No one has died," a man whispered. She didn't reply. But when Obi was found dead in his hut, eyes open, face peaceful, with his mat wet beneath him though the room was dry, no one asked again. A toddler began speaking in a voice too deep for her lungs. "She rises," she said, again and again, while her mother sobbed and covered her ears. Chicken stopped laying. A pot of stew boiled over and spilled itself into a perfect spiral on the floor. A girl saw her reflection blink at her in the river. The chief collapsed mid-prayer, muttering, "The gods are near." Mom and Ketchy lit black incense and broke her silence. Whatever they took from her, she has come to take back. No one touched their food. No one spoke Otammiri's name. But the land groaned now, like a body that had been quiet too long. On the hill, David was unrecognizable. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, gleaming with feverish joy. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, and the dirt under his nails was black. He muttered as he dug, deeper and deeper into the red earth. Chloe pleaded with him, grabbing his arm. "She's not giving us anything," she said. "She's taking everything." David yanked away, laughing. "We're finally in," he shouted. "Do you feel it? She's here. She chose me." Then the ground trembled, softly at first, then violently. A narrow spout of water shot from the drill hole like a geyser. Chloe screamed and fell back. The earth cracked, wide and sharp like a jaw. David didn't run. He dropped to his knees and raised his arms like a worshipper in church. "I've waited for this," he whispered. From the broken shrine behind him, the mist gathered, folding into shape, into her. "Otammiri." She rose, not with fury, but with absolute silence. Her body shimmered like a woman carved from rain, her hair long and shifting like riverweed, her feet never touching the ground. Her eyes were endless. David smiled at her. "I knew you'd come." She stepped forward and laid a single palm on his chest. No push. No power. Just contact. He gasped, then began to dissolve, his skin becoming liquid, his mouth turning to foam, his bones vanishing into the wet earth. Chloe screamed his name, but there was no one left to answer. Otammiri turned her head toward her. No anger. Just eyes. Chloe dropped to her knees. "We were wrong," she whispered. Otammiri closed her eyes, and vanished. The rain came not as thunder or flood, but as mist. Thin, silver, and silent. It fell only on the hill. In the village below, the ground remained dry, but the people knew. At dawn, they stood by their doors in silence, waiting for the moment when the air would tell them what had happened. No one spoke. No drums beat. Only the river moved, its surface now calm, as if the goddess had breathed once, then gone still. Mom and Ketchy rose from her mat before the first rooster crowed and walked alone to the stream's edge. She poured libation from a calabash into the water, her voice low and steady. "Balance has returned," she whispered, though she did not smile. Obi's body, now cold, was washed and wrapped. They buried him by the river, beneath the shade of a mango tree, where his spirit could rest close to the water he once feared. That day, a law was passed: no one would cross beyond the last irako tree again. The villagers kept their heads down, their prayers short. A child asked if Otammiri would come again. An elder replied, "Only if we forget." The shrine bowl, left alone on the edge of the hill, filled itself by nightfall. No one touched it. But the soil around it never dried again. It stayed soft, Always, like the earth remembered the footsteps of a woman made of rain. Chloe sat at the edge of the stream with her knees to her chest, watching the current move with a rhythm she didn't understand. Her skin was paler now, her lips always dry, and her voice barely used. The villagers gave her food, shelter, silence. They treated her as both guest and ghost. She spoke to no one, until Mama Nkechi approached her one dusk and sat beside her in silence. After a long pause, the old woman finally spoke. "You saw her?" Chloe nodded. "Then you understand. She didn't let you live to escape. She let you live to carry." Chloe blinked hard, but her tears had long since dried. That night, she climbed the hill alone. The wind didn't blow. The stars didn't blink. At the shrine, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the final stone, the one she'd hidden when David lost his mind. A diamond, once so beautiful, now looked dull and wet in her hand. She dropped it into the bowl. It disappeared without a ripple. She turned to leave, but a splash stopped her. Slowly, she turned back, and froze. 2 boots. Mark's boots. Neatly placed by the stream, just like before. Filled with water. And then, a whisper, not spoken, but heard deep inside. "Some things are not taken. They're returned." Chloe stepped forward, trembling. Her reflection stared up at her from the surface of the river. Same face. Same eyes. But in those eyes, something else flickered, like moving water. She gasped. And for a moment, it was not her reflection looking back. Dear viewers, what lessons did take out of this powerful story? Fire it up on the comment box. Thanks for watching. For more wonderful stories like this one, like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification button to stay updated.